Welcome back, brave souls of the unknown. I'm your host, diving deep into the darkest corners of human experience and the mysteries that lurk beyond our understanding. Today, we're embarking on a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about maps, about hell, and about the thin veil between our world and something far more sinister. Imagine for a moment that you're browsing through an old antique shop, your fingers trailing across dusty books and forgotten relics, when suddenly you stumble upon something that shouldn't exist, a map that claims to chart the very depths of damnation itself. Think about it. What would you do if you found a document that promised to guide you through the infernal regions that have haunted human imagination for millennia? This isn't just another urban legend or whispered tale passed down through generations. This is the story of the map to hell, and I guarantee that by the end of this video, you'll question the very nature of reality itself. The tale I'm about to share with you comes from the darkest archives of human experience, where the boundary between the living and the damned becomes terrifyingly thin. Before we dive into this abyss together, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you won't want to miss what's coming next. The story begins in the most unlikely of places, with the most ordinary of people, but what they discovered would shake the foundations of everything we believe about the afterlife and the maps that claim to chart its territories. Our story begins with Marcus Chen, a cartography professor at a prestigious university who had devoted his entire life to the study of ancient maps and their historical significance. Marcus wasn't someone who believed in the supernatural or entertained thoughts about otherworldly dimensions. He was a man of science, logic, and empirical evidence. However, on a cold October evening in 2019, everything he understood about reality would be forever shattered. Marcus had been called to authenticate a collection of medieval manuscripts that had been discovered in the basement of a demolished monastery in rural Romania. The monastery had stood for over 800 years before being abandoned in the early 20th century, and the documents found within its walls were unlike anything he had ever encountered. Among the yellowed parchments and crumbling texts was something that made his blood run cold, a map, drawn with meticulous detail, depicting what appeared to be a systematic layout of hell itself. The map was unlike anything in his extensive knowledge of medieval cartography. It showed intricate pathways, detailed geographical features, and what appeared to be precise measurements and coordinates. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. The map wasn't drawn in the typical style of medieval religious art or allegorical representations. Instead, it was crafted with the precision of a modern surveyor's chart, complete with elevation markers, distance calculations, and topographical details that suggested the creator had actually been to these places. The parchment itself seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and Marcus swore he could feel heat radiating from its surface whenever he touched it. What made this discovery even more unsettling was the accompanying journal, written in multiple languages and spanning several centuries, suggesting that this map had been passed down through generations of individuals who claimed to have actually used it as a guide. According to the journal entries, the first recorded expedition using this map took place in 1347, led by a Franciscan monk named Brother Matthias, who had become obsessed with proving the physical existence of hell. Brother Matthias had assembled a small group of volunteers, including 2 other monks and a local guide, and they had set out on what they believed would be a spiritual journey of discovery. The journal describes their preparation in harrowing detail. They had fasted for 40 days, undergone extensive purification rituals, and armed themselves with holy water, blessed crosses, and what they believed would protect them from demonic forces. The map had led them to a remote cave system in the Carpathian Mountains, where they claimed to have found an entrance that perfectly matched the coordinates indicated on the ancient parchment. What they discovered inside that cave system would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The journal entries become increasingly frantic and disjointed as they describe descending deeper into the earth, following the map's precise directions through tunnels that seemed to extend far beyond what was geologically possible. They wrote of hearing voices echoing from the darkness, of seeing shadows moving independently of any light source, and of experiencing temperature changes that defied natural explanation. The walls of the caves, according to their accounts, began to show signs of deliberate construction rather than natural formation, with carved symbols and inscriptions that matched those depicted on the map. But here's where their story takes a truly terrifying turn. After 3 days of following the map's guidance, they claimed to have reached what could only be described as a vast underground city, populated by beings that were neither fully human nor entirely otherworldly. The journal describes architectural structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and inhabitants who spoke in languages that predated human civilization. Only Brother Matthias returned from this expedition, and his final journal entries speak of horrors so profound that he spent the remaining years of his life in a state of catatonic terror, unable to speak of what he had witnessed in the depths below. Fast forward to our contemporary protagonist, Marcus Chen, who found himself unable to dismiss the historical accounts as mere medieval superstition. As a respected academic, he knew that approaching this subject would risk his professional reputation, but the evidence before him was too compelling to ignore. Marcus began conducting his own research, using modern archaeological techniques and geological surveys to investigate the locations mentioned in the ancient journal. What he discovered would change his understanding of both history and reality itself. Using ground-penetrating radar and advanced cave mapping technology, Marcus and his small team of trusted colleagues found that the cave systems described in the medieval accounts were indeed real, and they extended far deeper underground than any known geological formations in the region. The map's coordinates, when cross-referenced with modern GPS technology, led to locations that had been sealed off by local authorities for decades due to what officials termed geological instability. However, Marcus's research revealed that these sites had been the subject of numerous disappearances and unexplained phenomena dating back centuries. Local folklore spoke of these places as cursed ground, where people who ventured too close would vanish without a trace, or return in a state of psychological trauma that rendered them unable to function in normal society. Marcus began to realize that the map wasn't just a historical curiosity, but potentially a functional guide to places that existed in a reality parallel to our own. His team's initial reconnaissance of the cave entrances revealed construction techniques and architectural elements that seemed to predate known human civilization by thousands of years. The stonework showed signs of precision cutting and assembly that would have been impossible with medieval tools, and the passages themselves seemed to follow the exact specifications outlined in the mysterious map. Carbon dating of organic materials found near the entrances yielded results that contradicted everything they knew about the historical timeline of human habitation in the region. As Marcus delved deeper into his investigation, he began to experience disturbing dreams and visions that seemed to be directly related to his proximity to these sites, and he started to suspect that the map itself was somehow influencing his research in ways that defied rational explanation. What fascinates me most about Marcus's experience is how the psychological effects of his research began to manifest long before he had actually entered any of the locations described in the map. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever encountered something that challenged your fundamental beliefs about reality so profoundly that it began to alter your perception of the world around you? Marcus reported experiencing what he described as cognitive dissonance on a cosmic scale, where his scientific training constantly battled with the evidence he was uncovering. He began to suffer from chronic insomnia, plagued by vivid nightmares that seemed to provide him with additional details about the locations depicted in the map. These dreams were so detailed and consistent that Marcus started keeping a dream journal, and he was disturbed to discover that the information he was receiving in his sleep often proved to be accurate when he investigated it during his waking hours. The psychological toll of his research became apparent to his colleagues, who noted dramatic changes in his behavior and personality. Marcus, who had always been known for his methodical and rational approach to academic work, became increasingly erratic and obsessive in his pursuit of the truth behind the map. He began to isolate himself from friends and family, spending countless hours alone in his office, studying the ancient parchment and making notations that seemed to follow patterns and connections that only he could perceive. His wife later reported that he would often wake up in the middle of the night, muttering in languages she had never heard before, and that he had begun to display knowledge of historical events and geographical locations that were far outside his area of expertise. The most disturbing aspect of Marcus's psychological transformation was his growing conviction that the map was not merely a historical artifact, but a living document that was actively communicating with him. He claimed that the symbols and markings on the parchment would shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them, and that new details would appear overnight that provided additional guidance for his research. Marcus became convinced that he was being guided by some form of intelligence that existed beyond the boundaries of normal human experience, and that his role was to serve as a conduit between our world and whatever realm the map depicted. Realizing that he could no longer continue his research alone, Marcus made the difficult decision to assemble a team of specialists who could help him investigate the map's mysteries while maintaining some semblance of scientific objectivity. This decision was not made lightly, as Marcus knew that involving others would mean exposing them to the same psychological and potentially physical dangers that he had been experiencing. The team he assembled was carefully chosen for their expertise in various fields that would be essential for a comprehensive investigation of the map's claims. Dr. Sarah Williams, a cultural anthropologist with extensive experience in religious studies and ancient civilizations, was recruited to help interpret the symbolic and linguistic elements of the map and its accompanying texts. Her expertise in comparative mythology and religious practices would prove invaluable in understanding the cultural context of the document's creation. Marcus also brought in Dr. James Rodriguez, a geologist and cave exploration specialist, whose technical knowledge of underground formations and cave systems would be essential for safely navigating the locations depicted in the map. The team was completed by Dr. Emily Hassan, a psychologist specializing in trauma and altered states of consciousness, whose role would be to monitor the mental health of the team members and document any psychological phenomena they might experience during their investigation. What makes this team particularly interesting is that none of them were believers in the supernatural or paranormal before joining Marcus's project. They were all respected academics with established careers and reputations to protect. However, as they began to examine the evidence that Marcus had compiled, each of them experienced their own version of the psychological awakening that he had undergone. Dr. Williams reported that her dreams began to include detailed visions of religious ceremonies and rituals that corresponded to historical practices from cultures she had never studied. Dr. Rodriguez found himself inexplicably drawn to geological formations that seemed to match the topographical features depicted in the map. And Dr. Hassan began to experience what she described as empathic connections with the historical figures mentioned in the ancient journal. The team's initial meetings were marked by a growing sense of unease and anticipation, as each member began to realize that they were about to embark on an investigation that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the nature of reality itself. As they prepared for their first expedition to one of the locations indicated on the map, each team member reported experiencing increasingly vivid dreams and visions that seemed to be preparing them for what they would encounter in the depths below. The team's first expedition to the cave system indicated by the map's coordinates took place on a fog-shrouded morning in early November, when the veil between worlds is said to be at its thinnest. Marcus had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for what they would discover in the depths below. The entrance to the cave system was located in a remote valley that seemed to exist in a perpetual state of twilight, where the normal rules of light and shadow appeared to be suspended. As they approached the coordinates specified in the map, the team noticed that their electronic equipment began to malfunction in ways that couldn't be explained by normal electromagnetic interference. GPS devices showed impossible readings, compasses spun wildly, without regard for magnetic north, and their communication equipment produced static that seemed to contain voices speaking in unknown languages. The cave entrance itself was exactly as described in the medieval journal, a perfectly circular opening carved into the living rock, surrounded by symbols that matched those depicted on the map. But here's what truly disturbed the team. The entrance showed no signs of natural erosion or weathering, despite having been exposed to the elements for centuries. The stonework was as precise and clean as if it had been carved yesterday, and the symbols seemed to pulse with a faint luminescence that became more pronounced as they approached. Dr. Rodriguez's geological analysis revealed that the stone surrounding the entrance was composed of materials that didn't match any known rock formations in the region, and the precision of the carving suggested the use of tools and techniques that far exceeded medieval capabilities. As they prepared to enter the cave system, Each team member reported experiencing intense emotional reactions that seemed to be triggered by their proximity to the entrance. Dr. Williams felt an overwhelming sense of religious awe mixed with terror. Dr. Rodriguez experienced what he described as geological vertigo, and Dr. Hassan began to sense the presence of consciousness that seemed to be observing their every move. The map indicated that the first chamber they would encounter was designated as the antechamber of preparation, and the accompanying text warned that this space was designed to test the worthiness of those who sought to journey deeper into the realm beyond. As they crossed the threshold into the darkness below, their flashlights revealed a corridor that extended far beyond what should have been possible, given the geological constraints of the mountain, and the walls showed signs of deliberate construction that seemed to follow architectural principles that defied conventional understanding of space and dimension. What the team discovered in that first chamber defied everything they thought they knew about the physical laws that govern our reality. The space they entered was far larger than the external dimensions of the mountain could possibly contain, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above and walls that seemed to curve away into infinity. The air itself felt different, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle and their minds race with thoughts and memories that didn't belong to them. The map's guidance proved to be unnervingly accurate, leading them through a series of passages that branched off from the main chamber in patterns that matched the ancient parchment's detailed specifications. As they followed the map's directions deeper into the system, the team began to encounter evidence of previous visitors, carved messages in multiple languages spanning different historical periods, personal belongings that had been left behind by travelers from various eras, and most disturbing of all, detailed accounts of journeys into the depths that corresponded exactly to the descriptions in the medieval journal. Dr. Williams discovered inscriptions in Latin, Greek, and languages she couldn't identify, all describing similar experiences of descent into realms that existed beyond normal human comprehension. The walls themselves began to show signs of deliberate decoration, with murals and carvings that depicted scenes of otherworldly landscapes and beings that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What struck the team most profoundly was the realization that they were not explorers discovering something new, but rather the latest in a long line of individuals who had been drawn to this place by forces they couldn't fully understand. The map had guided countless others before them, and the evidence of their passage was preserved in the stone walls and chambers they traversed. As they prepared to venture deeper into the system, following the map's indication that the true journey was only just beginning, each team member felt the weight of history pressing down upon them, and the growing awareness that they were about to cross a threshold from which there might be no return. The ancient parchment seemed to pulse with increasing intensity as they descended, and Marcus began to suspect that the map itself was somehow alive, responding to their presence and guiding them toward a destination that existed not just in physical space but in dimensions of reality that human minds were never meant to comprehend. As our team ventured deeper into the abyss, following the map's precise instructions, they began to encounter phenomena that challenged the very foundations of their understanding of reality. The passages they traversed seemed to exist in a state of constant flux, with walls that shifted and changed when they weren't looking directly at them, and corridors that led to chambers that shouldn't have been able to exist within the confines of normal three-dimensional space. Dr. Hassan's psychological monitoring revealed that each team member was experiencing altered states of consciousness that seemed to be triggered by their proximity to certain locations marked on the map. These weren't hallucinations or stress-induced visions, but rather what appeared to be genuine expansions of perception that allowed them to see and understand aspects of reality that had previously been hidden from human awareness. The map continued to guide them through a labyrinth of passages that seemed to follow patterns based on mathematical principles that predated human civilization, and with each step deeper into the system, they found themselves moving further away from the world they knew and closer to something that existed beyond the boundaries of normal human experience. What they discovered in those depths would change everything they thought they knew about the nature of hell, the afterlife, and the thin veil that separates our world from realms that exist beyond human comprehension. But that, my friends, is where our first journey must end, leaving us suspended on the edge of revelation, with the map's greatest secrets still waiting to be uncovered. The team's descent into the abyss has only just begun, and the most terrifying discoveries still lie ahead in the depths below. What they found in those chambers beneath the earth would challenge everything we believe about the nature of reality itself, and the map's true purpose was about to be revealed in ways that would shake the foundations of human understanding. I want you to think about this. If you found a map that claimed to chart the very depths of hell itself, would you have the courage to follow where it leads? Would you be able to resist the call of the unknown, even knowing that the journey might change you forever? As we prepare for the next part of this terrifying journey, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever encountered something that challenged your fundamental beliefs about reality? What would you do if you discovered evidence that the supernatural realm was not just mythology, but a tangible reality that could be explored and mapped? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss what happens next as we continue to follow the map deeper into the abyss, where the true horrors await and the boundaries between our world and the realm of the damned begin to dissolve completely.